أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد وانتشت روحي وصار الدمع يجري يا إلهي خذ بقلبي للرشاد أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب.
Why the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, in another hadith, an authentic hadith, they asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They said, how can a person, how can he curse his own parents? And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained how this can happen. He said, a man may insult another man's parent, and then in retaliation for that, he insults his parent. Therefore, they are equal. He carries the sin of the person who actually cursed his parent, who insulted his parent. So a person is guilty of making a la'na. He doesn't necessarily have to use the word la'na, because the Prophet ﷺ said that the person merely insults the other person's parent. So just by insulting someone else's parent, that person retaliates and insults his person, and then it is as though he has insulted his own parent, and then Allah Ta'ala's la'na is upon that person. This teaches us a very important principle in the Sharia, a very important principle in fiqh, that the person who causes a sin is like the person who actually commits that sin. If a person leads to someone, if a person's actions lead another person to commit a sin, then he carries then he is equal in sin. That he is equal in sin to the person who actually carries out that sin. So we should beware of our statements, our actions, making sure that they do not lead to other people disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So cursing one's parents, even if it is by an action that causes someone else to curse one's parents, that is a major sin. The Prophet ﷺ then said, لَعَنَ اللَّهُ مَنْ آوَى مُحْدِثًا, that Allah's la'na is upon a person who shelters a muhdith. Various different explanations have been given as to what a muhdith is. Some of the ulama said that it is an innovator, a mubtadi', a person who innovates in the religion. Other people say it is a fugitive, the person who the waliul amr, that the leader of the Muslims in a Muslim land, in an Islamic state, is after. Or it could be a person who introduces a certain sin, a sin that is not being carried out in a certain society, in a certain community, and then the person introduces a sin that is not being carried out in that society. That person is a muhdith. Whoever shelters this person, then he can incur the la'na of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, لَعَنَ اللَّهُ مَنْ غَيَّرَ مَنَارَ الْأَرْضِ, Allah's curse is upon the person who alters the boundaries of the land. So a person who misappropriates the land that someone else owns by moving the boundaries, by wrongfully giving one's land to someone else or for themselves. And this can refer to physically changing the boundaries, physically changing the fences or the markings, and it can also refer to, for example, now we find in certain places we have people working in places of authority where they have records, land registries, and so on and so forth. And then some people, they fiddle with the records, and they move the boundaries. They may move the markings in the records, so the ownership wrongfully goes to someone else. Sometimes they do this taking bribes from other people, and this is a major sin. The Prophet ﷺ, in an authentic hadith in Sahih Muslim, said, whoever wrongfully takes even a handspan of land, his neck will be encircled in it, meaning that land, that handspan of land he has taken, it will be put on around his neck like a collar. then he will be dragged down with it, the 7 earths, dragged down with it 7 earths on the day of judgment. So this shows that this is a major sin. This is something which cannot be taken lightly. The Shaykh Rahmatullah Alayhi then mentions another hadith. He says, وعن طارق بن شهاب أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال دخل الجنة رجل في ذباب ودخل النار رجل في ذباب قال وكيف ذلك يا رسول الله قال مر رجلان على قوم لهم صنم لا يجوزه أحد حتى يقرب له شيئا فقالوا لأحدهما قرب قال ليس عندي شيء أقربه قالوا له قرب ولو ذبابا فقرب ذبابا فخلوا سبيله فدخل النار فقالوا لآخر قرب فقال ما كنت لأقرب لأحد شيئا دون الله عز وجل فضربوا عنقه فدخل الجنة رواه أحمد. Tariq ibn Shihab narrated that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, a man will enter paradise due to a fly, and another will enter hell due to a fly. They said, Messenger of Allah, how is that? He replied, 2 men passed a people who had an idol. None would pass it unless he offered something to it. They said to one of the men, make an offering. He said, I do not have anything to offer. They said, make an offering, even if it is just a fly. So he offered a fly. And then they let him go, and he entered hellfire. They said to the other one, make an offering. He said, I shall not make an offering to anyone lesser than Allah the Mighty and the Majestic. So they struck his neck, meaning they killed him, and he entered Jannah. Now in this hadith, in this narration, we're told a story of 2 people from the the previous before the of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were going somewhere, and they had to pass a people who had an idol, and they would not allow anyone to pass this idol unless they made a sacrifice, they offered a sacrifice to it. And these 2 men had nothing to sacrifice. The first one was told to sacrifice a fly so that he could pass, and he said, then in order to pass by the idol, he offered a fly, and then he entered, after he died, into the hellfire. The other one, he put his worship, his tawheed, his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over the need to pass by the idol, and he took izzah in his religion, he took pride in his tawheed, and he said, I will not make any slaughter to anyone lesser other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they struck his neck, they killed him, and he died as a martyr, and he entered Jannah. Now, there's actually a difference of opinion between the ulama about the authenticity of this narration. Some of the ulama say that this hadith is hasan. Others say it is inauthentic. And they mention that there are actually 3 problems with the transmission of this hadith. Firstly, the narrator, Tariq ibn Shihab, he did not hear this directly. He did not hear directly from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the first issue. He did not hear from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The other, secondly, there's a difference of opinion as to whether Tariq ibn Shihab was a Sahabi or whether he was a Tabi'i. If he was a Sahabi, then this is what is known as the mursal of a Sahabi, which is accepted. A Sahabi does not have to hear directly from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam because he is narrating it from another Sahabi who is also reliable. So the narrations of the Sahaba are accepted whether they heard it from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam or they didn't hear it directly from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if it's a Sahabi, this isn't a problem. However, if he is a Tabi'i, then a Tabi'i, if he does not mention the Sahabi who he heard it from, then this hadith is mursal, and it is a form It is a type of weak hadith. So this is the first problem with the transmission of this hadith. The first problem with the hadith. The second problem is that in the chain of narration, A'mash is one of the narrators. Al-A'mash. And Al-A'mash is a mudallis. And here he concealed the identity of the previous narrator. He conceals the identity of his sheikh by narrating it on the authority of that narrator's sheikh. He uses the term an. He says an fulan, on the authority of such and such. And a mudallis does this in order to skip the sheikh who comes before him in the chain, only explicitly mentioning his sheikh's sheikh. And you've studied this issue in Nukhbat al-Fikr. This a mudallis, like al-A'mash, his narration is only accepted if he explicitly mentions who he heard the hadith from. So al-A'mash, he makes what is known as the an'ana in order to conceal the identity of his sheikh. So this is a problem with the hadith. This is a weakness in the hadith. The third problem is that Imam Ahmad, Abu Nu'aym and Ibn Abi Shayba, they narrated this hadith from Tariq ibn Shihab, narrating it from Salman al-Farisi. It ends at Salman al-Farisi. Now in general, if a narration like this is mawquf, if it ends at a Sahabi, it is accepted, because the Sahaba in general do not speak about the ghaib, the unseen, unless they have been told about it by the Prophet ﷺ. However, Salman al-Farisi radiyallahu anhu is from the Sahaba who used to narrate the Israeliyat. So there's a possibility that this narration is from the Israeliyat. There's a possibility that is not from the Prophet ﷺ. And these three are some of the problems that the ulama rahmatullah alayhim mention about the authenticity of the hadith. Other ulama go even further. They say that the actual matan of the hadith itself, the actual text of the hadith, the actual meaning of the hadith, of the narration, is problematic. And they say that it apparently contradicts the principle, the Quranic principle, that a person who commits kufr under duress is excused as long as he does not make kufr, as long as he does not believe the kufr or shirk in his heart. This is what some of the ulama say about the meaning of the hadith. But however, if we reflect upon the meaning of hadith, we find that there is no real contradiction. Firstly, some of the ulama, they say that, who reply to them, they say that this person who offered the fly and entered the hellfire, they say that the term qarrib is used, make an offering. Qarrib means draw close, and a person cannot be regarded as drawing close unless he makes an offering, and in his heart he also intends the pleasure of other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they say that he made shirk, he made kufr inwardly and outwardly, because the word qarrib is taken. So because his heart was not satisfied with Tawheed at the time when he outwardly committed the actual kufr, then he disbelieved and he entered the hellfire. Other ulama offer another explanation. They say that if you look at this story, there's no duress involved at all. Okay, there's no duress involved at all. Why? Because they did not have to pass this idol. If they said make an offering, all he had to do was turn back, not make an offering and turn back. So there was no duress involved. The hadith doesn't mention that they would kill a person who didn't make a sacrifice. So the first person, he put his need of passing this idol over his deen, and therefore and there was no coercion, there was no duress, therefore he entered the fire by offering this fire. As for the second person, they did not kill him because of not making an offering and then turning back, but because of what he said. He said, "Ma kuntu li'uqarriba shay'an dun Allah azza wa jal." He said, "I will not slaughter anything lesser than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." So they took this as an insult for their idol. So because of what they perceived as an insult to the idol, they killed him, and not merely because he refrained from making a slaughter. So on inspection, there is no real duress involved. So the meaning is not actually problematic. Other scholars give other explanations. They say that this shows that there's an exception to the rule. They say that the rule about being excused from kufr under duress, they say there's an exception. Some of them say that there's an exception is made in shirk. They say that this applies to all forms of kufr except shirk. Others say that it refers to statements of kufr but not actions of kufr. However, this is something which is not correct, because the ayah in the Quran is general, and especially with the problems in the chain in the transmission of this hadith, we can't use this to make an exception from the Quranic principle regarding kufr under duress. So in this chapter, in the 10th chapter of Kitab Al-Tawhid, we learn that slaughtering is an act of worship, and no slaughter, no matter how valuable, no matter how cheap the sacrifice may be, can be offered to anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the name of anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may not be taken upon sacrifice. And if the sacrifice is directed to anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name is taken, this is shirk, major shirk, which takes one outside of the fold of Islam, and it contravenes Tawheed from its very foundation. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. والصلاة والسلام الأتمان الأكملان على خير خلق الله أجمعين وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن اهتدى بهديه واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. In the next chapter then, the Shaykh Rahmatullah alayhi says, باب لا يذبح لله بمكان يذبح فيه لغير الله. This is the 11th chapter. That one may not sacrifice for Allah in a place in which one sacrifices for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the scenario is that a slaughter is made for Allah alone, in Tawheed, ikhlas for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, taking the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, this sacrifice is taken in a place which is normally used for making a sacrifice to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for making a sacrifice to a false deity, for a dead person, for a prophet, and so on and so forth. It can refer to the actual spot upon which the mushrikeen make their slaughter for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the area surrounding it. For example, the area surrounding a grave, and so on and so forth. And this is something which is impermissible, because it outwardly conforms to the actions of the mushrikeen, and also it can lead to deviated intentions. A person doing this could eventually begin to believe that it is actually good, virtuous to do it in this spot, or others could actually see this and be deluded by this and actually commit the shirk itself, and so it leads to shirk. It is prohibited because of it. So the ruling is that it is haram, it is prohibited, and it is a wasila, it is a means to shirk. This is slaughtering, to make a slaughter for Allah Jalla wa Ala in a place where the mushrikun make the slaughter to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is haram, it is not permissible, and it is a means to shirk. It is an avenue, it is a path to shirk, and the Prophet ﷺ cut off every avenue to shirk by prohibiting those actions which could eventually lead to shirk. The Shaykh Rahmatullah alayhi says, وَقَوْلِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى لَا تَقُمْ فِيهِ أَبَدًا لَمَسْجِدٌ أُسِّسَ عَلَى التَّقْوَى مِنْ أَوَّلِ يَوْمٍ أَحَقُّ أَنْ تَقُومَ فِيهِ رِجَالٌ يُحِبُّونَ أَنْ يَتَطَهَّرُوا وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُطَّهِّرِينَ. Do not ever stand in it. A mosque founded on taqwa from the first day has a greater right for you to stand in. In there are men who love to purify themselves, and Allah loves those who purify themselves. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah prohibited the believers from standing in prayer in Masjid al-Dirar. This is a masjid that was built near to Masjid Quba, and it was built by the Munafiqun. And the reason they built this masjid was to establish a place from which they could plot and plan against the believers, and to divide the ranks of the believers, to cause dissension amongst the believers. And praying in such a place is impermissible, even if one intends to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it increases the numbers of the munafiqeen, and it aids them in their course, therefore increasing their morale and encourage them to work harder in their plots and in their schemes against the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the relevance of this ayah to this chapter, to Tawheed, is that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions, they were prohibited to perform salah for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that masjid, even though their worship is pure, as outwardly it shows conformity and it shows approval and honor for this place of sin. So in the same way, so anywhere making worship for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in any place which would help the mushrikun, would help the kuffar, this is something which is prohibited. So in the same way, one may not slaughter for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a place in which the mushrikun slaughter for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.